Hello, everyone. It's Chris here from Charity Digital. And as you can all see, or at least hopefully can all see, I am welcoming you today from the home of football, St James's Park. I am, of course, joking. As the photo suggests, there's not a lot of self-isolation going on there. I have, in fact, been banished to the bedroom today. Which none of you need to nor probably wish to see. So I have, but it has allowed me to have plenty of fun with the Zoom backgrounds, as you can tell. It is, of course, another fully remote Charity Digital webinar day, and thank you all for joining us. And I really do hope you're all managing to stay safe and sane, especially as we're being teased by this lovely weather. Excuse me. We're now firmly in the weeds with, working in coronavirus, and it's safe to say that, the way we operate will never be the same again. It truly is great to see so many charities adapt, but there still is a lot to be fearful of. And for those who aren't quite as fortunate, we do want to put out there and say that hope is not lost, and that it's more important now than ever before to be brave and to be bold. Especially where digital is concerned, and we exist to help you through that rapid transition, and not only to change quickly, but also to set yourself up for the long term and be successful later on down the road. As part of that, we're releasing daily content to help all charities be more digital. A lot of that which will be discussed today, so I'll not dig into it now. But one thing we're doing is also asking for you to help for you to help us help you. We launched a campaign last week asking charities two things. One, what help you need the most, and two, share your stories with us. Share how you've changed, share how you've grown, share what's different and how you're adapting. And we've had a great response so far, but we'd love to hear from more of you. We'll be sending out a link for you to do just that, along with the webinar resources after the fact. And we'll be releasing all that we find, both the answers and the stories, over the next few weeks on our website, so both you and other charities can see exactly how we're changing, coping, and succeeding in what is the surreal new normal. And we're also hosting webinars like today's. And today, we're all joined by some of my very esteemed colleagues, our content lead, Aidan Patterson, our business development manager, Lisa Chamet, and our fearless CEO, Jonathan Chevalier. And they're going to talk about, the digital tools, resources, and strategies you can put in place to help manage the impact and get yourself through this COVID-19 environment. Before I hand over, though, the usual house rules. As I did mention, this is fully remote, so please forgive us for any potential, digital mishaps that might happen. We have tried to, put all the precautions in place to prevent this, but in the event that something does, please stick with us and we'll get things back on track as quickly as possible. We will be sending out all the resources, so the presentation, the recording will be available for the will be available after the fact, and we generally send this out within a week, so keep an eye on your inboxes for those. And lastly, at the end of each webinar, we do like to host a Q&A session. So you can hit the Q&A button, which I think is in the bottom center of your screen, to submit your questions. And I assume there will be quite a few today. Well, we better get cracking. So without further ado, please join me in handing over a big welcome to Lisa, Jonathan, and Aidan. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for handing over there. Hello, everyone. I'm Aidan Patterson. I'm the content lead here at Charity Digital, and I'm here today to talk to you all about remote working. And as you can probably guess from what little you can see here, I'm working remotely myself right now, and I imagine that most, if not all of you are as well. So that seems like a fitting way for us to talk about it. Now, ideally, this is the kind of transition that we'd have seen planned out for some time. But unfortunately, we just in this situation have not had that luxury. We've all had to pivot to remote working with very little notice. We've all done our best and we made decisions and picked things up on the fly. But as we're increasingly seeing these days on the news and in discussions both in and out of the sector, now that we're embedded in this and that we've been doing it for a little while, it's time for us to stop and review things a little bit. More and more questions are coming up around security, and that's something that under normal circumstances, we'd be reviewing thoroughly and testing before we launched and before we went fully remote. But again, we just have not in this situation had that luxury. And now that we're sort of set up, it's a good time for us to take stock, to take a look at our systems and say to ourselves, okay, this process is secure and this one needs some work. In that vein, we've been publishing a lot of written content regarding remote working across the last few weeks. And all of these different topics, they could all fill a webinar in and of themselves. So what I'll be covering today is really just some basics to help you get started. But if you want more information, then I would encourage you to check out the wide range of remote working content we've already published on our site. So the first thing that I want to take a look at is some of the tech that you need to get set up. In terms of hardware, the good thing about working from home is you can get started with most of what we're going to talk about today with little more than a laptop. But you might want to accessorize a little bit. If you're new from working from home, if this is your first time, then you might be surprised at how difficult and how different you find it compared to your normal office working environment. It can have a real effect on your physical well-being. And in that vein, you may want to invest in a desktop monitor and a keyboard if possible. This helps with your posture and it'll make it less likely that you'll experience cramps or discomfort during the day. You also might want to look into the possibility of an ergonomic keyboard that will help reduce the risk of repetitive strain injury or RSI. And there's alternatives to this if this isn't available. Another thing you can do is you can operate a work-issued laptop using your desktop computer's keyboard, screen, and mouse by connecting something called a KVM switch. That's a keyboard, video, and mouse switch. You connect that and you can sort of broadcast from the laptop onto your home desktop computer. That switch then lets you switch between controlling your own desktop computer or your charity laptop computer using the same keyboard, monitor, and mouse. Now, maybe another thing you might be experiencing trouble with is the Wi-Fi signal in your home. If this is the case, the best solution is to use a mesh Wi-Fi system. These are systems that use three or four or more small devices, and you can place these about your home. The Wi-Fi signal moves from one to the others, and what this just means is that you can place one close to your main router or in the home office and one midway between them, and that will ensure that you'll have a strong Wi-Fi connection wherever you're working. Now, when it comes to staying in touch with your team, there's a number of tools that can help. And I'm just going to run through briefly two of the main platforms. That's Microsoft Teams and Zoom, both of which are available at discounted charity rates on the Charity Digital Exchange site. Zoom is perhaps the most famous video conferencing platform in the world right now, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of coverage on the news. Their cloud-based system is very easy to use, it's quick to set up, and it's available as both a free or paid service. Microsoft Teams is Microsoft's all-encompassing workstream collaboration and communication platform. It offers meetings, chats, video calls, and file sharing, and it's integrated within the Microsoft Stack application, and it helps bring everyone together, and it make you feel a bit more like you're in that shared workspace that you normally are. In many ways, both of these applications, they overlap and they can compete in ways in the sense that they offer a set of services for video conferencing. When it comes to features, both Zoom and Teams enable online meetings, chats, calls, screen sharing, and file sharing, and both have their advantages. Microsoft's integration between Teams and its Office 365 stack enables Teams to be a sort of one-stop shop for a lot of charities and other organizations. This can allow for seamless collaboration, backups, which are very important, and file search. Whereas Zoom is often touted for its ease of use, its simple interface, the ability to get end users up and running with very little IT training or support. But really, I think it comes down to what your needs are and what the right fit is for your charity. Now, for digital leaders, charity professionals who are concerned about productivity, there are online project management platforms available that can help you ensure that deliverables remain on track even when we're dispersed and not in the office environment. Some good examples are Monday or Asana, the latter of which is available at a discounted charity rate at the Charity Digital Exchange. Now, all of these tools can help keep your displaced team connected, informed, and motivated. And my colleague Lisa will be covering these in more detail, so I won't get into them too much now. But I do want to move on and talk a little bit about security. Now, I'm going to keep this fairly entry level, as I know we all have different levels of familiarity with these protocols, and it can be a bit intimidating, but I think it's a very important thing for us to focus on in this present moment. So what I want to focus on today is what we all as individuals can do. Now, again, we have published quite a lot of specific remote working cybersecurity guidance, so please do check that out if you want more information. Now, once you've got these systems that we're discussing set up, it's a good time to focus on keeping them secure. Now, what we're seeing is with more charities than ever working from home, new technologies are being needed to keep systems and data secure. Even with the best of intentions, there's no doubt that your home computer or a laptop borrowed from the office is less secure than the one running in your workplace under the watchful eye and guidance of your dedicated IT staff. Many charity employees are remotely signing into systems that hold sensitive data relating to service users, beneficiaries, and donors, many of them for the first time. We as charities have a legal and an ethical duty to secure and protect this data. So I want to run through quickly 5 simple tips that you can do to help secure your remote systems. Number 1, make sure that antivirus software is installed and up to date. This should ideally be to a professional standard, such as Avast Business Antivirus. Alternatively, there are a number of popular providers that are available for low or free rates, including McAfee, Norton 360, and Bitdefender. Secondly, back up your data. If you do not back up your data, then you do run the risk that important information could be lost, which could impede or even derail service delivery. Backups are often performed automatically in an office environment, but this may not be the case now that you're working from home. It's best to check with your team whether this is the case and find out whether the onus will be on you. 3, I would consider using a password management or identity and access management system, such as Okta. In short, these systems ensure that a user is who they say they are. Administrators can grant levels of access to users that would be appropriate for their credentials. They do this by establishing a user identity and binding it to their profile with another method of authentication. This use of an additional authentication method, what that does, it assures you that the request for access is being made by a member of staff whose identity has been verified. Number 4, and this is probably the most simple one, make sure to keep systems and applications up to date. In addition to your computer's operating system, it is also important to keep any other applications you use up to date to ensure that any bugs that are discovered within those systems are fixed promptly. If not, we do run the risk of jeopardizing these systems. It makes it much easier for cyber criminals to break in and exploit them. And finally, secure your internet router. All internet routers ship with default usernames and passwords, and these can often be something as simple and easy to guess as admin or password. This allows you to configure your internet settings, such as whether a Wi-Fi password is required. Now, cyber criminals do know these defaults, so it makes it much easier for them to hack into your home network, intercept your communications, and gain access to your systems, or even lock you out of your own broadband service. So this is something that I would recommend doing. And again, it's something we have published guidance on our site. And finally, when it comes to security, the last thing I wanted to talk about is the National Cyber Security Center have published a number of great resources aimed specifically at charities. I'd point you towards their Cyber Essentials program and their specific COVID-19 guidance. Information on both is available on our site. Now, if you want to test your cybersecurity systems, I'd very much recommend using their Exercise in a Box tool. And if you want to run more advanced diagnostics and breach testing, we've published some in-depth guidance, which I've included a link to there. This can help you really just check where you're at with the level of maturity and strength of your cybersecurity systems, make sure that you're not running any undue risks. And finally, I just wanted to reflect a little bit, like this switch to remote working, it's been pushed on us all very suddenly. And we hear a lot about the downsides and the negative effects on the sector. But in many ways, flexible and remote working arrangements, they could be of real long-term benefit to the charity sector, because so many workers in this sector are either volunteers, they're part-time, they have family commitments, they need to be or would prefer to be on flexible working arrangements. It also helps field workers to stay connected to office staff. I think that we're learning a great deal. We're being able to test these systems in real time, in the real world. We find out how they work. And I wanted to sign off with a quote that Zoe Amar, a trustee of ours, she gave this great quote stating that charities need to engage with their staff to help gauge the level of flexibility needed, both at present and also moving forward into the future. So that if your charity really wants to change the way that it works for the better, you need to collaborate with staff to define what the change looks like and encourage them to own it. And that's why what I've talked about here is all focused really on the individual and what we can do. Because if we want to have these systems moving forward, if we want to learn from them, then I think that we can do that by us all taking ownership, us all acting as digital champions making the best of this remote working situation. And that's all I've got. So I'll hand you back to my colleagues. But thank you for having me, everyone. It's great to see all of you in the chat. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. It's great to see all of you. And I'd like to thank Aidan for running through the working from home environment there. It's very useful and helpful. But of course, as charities, we're only actually fulfilling our charitable impacts when we're delivering services to our end users, to our beneficiaries. And so I'm actually going to focus a lot more on that here. And also, we're only actually going to be able to do that sustainably if we can actually keep the income coming into our organisations. And I think we all understand some of the challenges in that at the moment, with many face-to-face fundraising activities obviously not being possible anymore. So I'm going to start off by looking at the income side of things. And in particular, I want to think about income strategically here. So most of this webinar is really intended to be very practically focused, immediate tactical actions. So you're probably thinking, why is Jonathan talking about something that's strategic? And I think this is because actually, although it is strategic, this translates directly into practical action as well. It's called an Ansoff matrix. It's normally used to help businesses plan their income growth. Some of you might have come across it before, but we can definitely use it for a charity. And what it basically says is you can grow your income by moving in two dimensions. You can find new customers or new donors. That's one dimension. And you can sell them new products or services. That's the other dimension. So let's look at this maybe in terms of a charity example. So let's imagine I'm a small local charity and most of my income might come from regular donors. But the market penetration here is really about just getting more local people to sign up to my regular giving program. In effect, just doubling down on what we already do. This is typically the lowest risk and highest return activity. If we then look at product development, what does that mean here? This is about maybe starting a new fundraising initiative. So maybe I decide to run a new fundraising dinner, a gala dinner. The people I'm going to invite to this in the first instance are actually my existing regular donors, and I'm going to hope that they can bring all their friends along as well. So it's a new initiative with existing donors. This is a medium risk, and the main risk here is that this activity just doesn't appeal to my donors. Market development would be about getting to a new group of donors. So maybe most of my existing donors are over the age of 50, and I can actually grow my income by getting to another group. So what I'm going to do with them is encourage them to donate to an existing program, my regular giving program. And the key risks here are that, you know, these people might never have heard of my charity. They might not like my messaging, and my promotional strategy might not work. So I might not be able to get hold of them. The last box here, diversification, is really high risk because this means I'm trying to approach entirely new donors with an entirely new form of fundraising. So what's the relevance to this here? Well, it's actually really very, very relevant, because if as a charity you've been stopped from doing a whole lot of existing fundraising activities and you're having to do new fundraising activities, what it says to you is you need to focus those activities on your existing donors. If you're going after a whole new group of donors with that strategy, you're in that high risk diversification box. If you have got some existing fundraising initiatives that you can keep running, then by all means you can then actually use those to try and get to new donors as well. But I think it's really worthwhile bearing this in mind as we move through the following slides. So let's go to the next slide. So this just talks about different forms of gaining income. So we can have commission services, grants, other trading, public fundraising. And for me, there's four key principles here. Number one, we want to protect the income that is kind of already committed, that people would have donated anyway. If it's a commissioner, we've got an existing contract, how do we protect it? If we've got a grant, how do we protect it? If people were going to donate to my London Marathon initiative, how do I ensure they still donate? So income protection is number one thing to think of here. Number two, because we know we're going to lose some income, is how do we actually replace that? So how do we get new income on top of that income protection? Number 3, really, really fundamental. Whatever you do, you're going to need to have to communicate about it. And number 4, resource. And I'm conscious that one of the reactions of a lot of charities to the whole lockdown has been people have been furloughed. So one of the problems, if we're going to take actions to generate more income, is we're going to need resource to do that. And maybe we furloughed too much of that resource. Maybe we need to bring some back. Or maybe we actually need to look more at how we can actually use volunteers to do that for us. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to go really very quickly through these because I have got a lot of material here to do, and we can only really skim the surface. So if you're delivering commission services, I'm really hoping you're already on top of this, that you've already been talking to the commissioners, you've maybe started to work, you've maybe already worked out how you can change your service in order to keep it going if there were elements of face-to-face that couldn't be delivered. But also it's worth thinking about other things like performance targets. If you haven't talked about those, it might just not be possible to hit those anymore. Hopefully the commissioners will be understanding when you talk that through. But also it's worth looking at the opportunity side here as well, because if the commissioners have found they've had to cancel some services because they can't be delivered through other service providers, and you've actually transitioned your service online in some way, then maybe actually you can extend that service to some of the beneficiaries of the other providers that are now being looked after. So you can engage in that discussion. You can talk about anything else that it might be possible to do. A lot of the same considerations come around when you're talking about grant funded services as well. So I won't go through that in detail. Grant funders are obviously also very interested in impact measures, so you might need to talk to them about how they can relax those, or maybe you need different measures now. It's worth talking to them about whether some of the funding can be diverted. So if you're having to set up digital services, there's some investment in that. Will they let you put some of the funding into that? Will they let you treat some of the funding as unrestricted? And do they have any new COVID-19 related funds you could apply for? The Charity Excellence website's got a list of, I think it's now over 250 emergency funds that people can apply for. And you might have heard on the news yesterday, the government have launched a new £750 million scheme. It's going to be administered by the National Lotteries Community Fund, and charities will be able to apply for that. There aren't any details on that yet, but as soon as they're available, they'll be both communicated by the National Lottery Community Fund, and we will also cover those as well through Charity Digital. I do want to throw in a word of caution though on grant writing. You remember that diversification box. Grants can take a lot of time and effort to write, and they can often be binary. You know, you could put all that effort in and get nothing back. So be cautious in terms of how much effort you put into this. I'm hoping that some of these emergency ones, because I've not been into the detail, if anybody has, maybe they want to share that through the chat with us. I'm hoping that they're being made super easy to apply for, so they're not really resource intensive. If they are really intensive and you're not used to grant writing, at a minimum, get someone who is to help you, would be my advice. Let's talk about other services, other training services. This tends to probably affect more the kind of heritage organisations, arts organisations. Simple things, can you turn pre-committed fees into donations? So I was recently written to by a theatre I support, and they said, you know, you can have your money back, you can have a credit note, or you can just give me your ticket fee as a donation. And I thought, well, I would have spent that money anyway. You can have it, you can keep it as a donation. And then, of course, they can claim the gift aid on top of that. It's also worth thinking about, if you're in this category, can you deliver a free service? So the National Theatre have been running lots of their classic material like One Man, Two Governors, and they're doing that free of charge, but then they're putting a fundraising button beside it and encouraging people to donate. And could you forward sell your services? That's also worth considering about. So getting people to buy some access in the future, buy tickets for future access, but pay you now so you keep that income turning over. But let's go to fundraising, public fundraising, because this is where I'm spending the most time within this section. I still need to go through this pretty quickly though. So the first thing here for me is protect your income. So great example here was Tommy's. They were going to have a number of runners doing the London Landmarks Challenge, and what they did was they turned it into the local Landmarks Challenge. So they encouraged their runners to still go out, do their 13 and a bit miles to qualify for a half marathon. They encouraged them to record it with a tool like Strava, Runkeeper, or something, so it's evidence, and then to get the sponsorship that supports that. So if you had any of those types of events, you can do the same. Other virtual, if you were going to run a quiz, well, you can take that online now and run it virtually as well. If you're going to have a fundraising dinner, one of the big money earners there is after an auction, you can still do that auction online. And I guess one of the key things here is, you know, we're all stuck at home. There's only so much TV we can watch at the end of the day. So it's good to actually engage in other activities. I've done 2 quizzes already, didn't generate any money. But if there was a charity one, I'd have loved to have been involved. So do kind of think about how you can take these events virtual, how you can take them online. It's also worth thinking about how you can raise new funds. I did a little survey on Monday evening. I looked at a random sample of 20 of the top 200 charities. So they're roughly, these are charities with something over £20 million income a year. I found actually only 35% of them, and these are all organisations that fundraise on a regular basis, only 35% of them had launched a COVID emergency campaign, whereas I pretty much bet that maybe 90% of them have a major income challenge, if not more. So it kind of stands to reason to me to say, you know, if you're going to need the money, and I think you probably will, launch an emergency campaign, let people understand you've got a challenge. Also consider new at-home events, challenge events. You'll all remember the Ice Bucket Challenge about 5 or so years ago. This raised over $200 million for ALS in the US. And so phenomenally successful. We're all stuck at home. How I would love an imaginative fun challenge that I could video. And if you can come up with one of these, some of them will go viral and earn a lot of money. But the point at the end of the day is people can do them at home, they're not stopped. Also, you might want to go back and consider things like gift aid recovery. Have you actually recovered all of the gift aid for money people have donated to you in the past? Because if you haven't, there could be money on the table there that you can easily go after. And there are services that can help you go after these as well. There's clickable links all over these pages. You can see 2 of them, and the images are clickable as well. And we're actually going to be publishing all of those after the event as supporting resources. So those will be available within the week for all of you. I want to talk a little bit about digital technology to support fundraising as well. So fundraising platforms, you're going to need a platform if you haven't already got one. We publish a lot of articles talking about the different platforms, how to use them. So do go online and use them. We're constantly updating them, and we're going to be doing another update imminently, because we've just noticed that one of the providers on there, Wonderful, has actually pulled out of fundraising because their core business is actually telecom, so they're focusing on that at the moment for obvious reasons. Some of the vendors are actually really helpful in terms of supporting materials as well. So on this page, you've got Charity Checkout. They've got a COVID-19 resource donor. They're a text giving platform, so you might want to think about text giving as well as normal website-based giving. And Blackboard, who run the Just Giving platform, they've also got a really useful hub with a lot of information in it. So worth accessing all of that. And I guess when you're thinking about platforms, also don't necessarily always gravitate to the lowest cost, because what you actually want is the platform that's going to raise you the most money. So look at the ones that've got the features that you want. Look at who's actually going to be the most helpful to you as a vendor as well, because maximizing your income is going to be the most important thing here. Let's go to the next slide. So communication is incredibly important here. And I think this is one of the reasons why quite a few charities have been reluctant to actually launch their COVID campaigns. There's been a little bit of a feeling that maybe the donor community, you know, everyone is affected by this. Everybody is it's kind of destabilized in some way. So there's been a worry that people are not necessarily going to want to hear the message or want to support. But the evidence doesn't actually support that. You know, the evidence says that consumers out there, that they understand that charities are going through a tough time, and they will support that if they can. If we look at previous recessions, you know, the British public have been fantastic at supporting charities through recessions. So there's no reason why they won't support you here. So you need to actually communicate more, but be sensitive, nuance your message, you know, maybe acknowledge that people are having a tough time, maybe acknowledge that not everyone can support you, maybe acknowledge they might want your support as a beneficiary. There's some great supporting materials here as well. So both Jasmine Adams and our own Chris Hall did 2 brilliant webinars last week at the Project Everyone conference, online conference, virtual conference, all around communication. So do head over and access those. You also might want to look at email platforms. If you haven't got one already and you're going to need to be communicating with people more often, then you need an email platform. So MailChimp provides limited volumes free of charge, and we have our own email platform as well, which is very highly functioned. It's based on digital technology, and we've got a free offer there. So let's go to the next slide. You also want to think about social media. You know, if you've already got an audience, it's going to be brilliant for communicating more with them. We've got 6 webinars on the Charity Digital site talking about social media, so we've got a real depth of information to help you there. We also have a great video from our conference last year with Cara Lewin. She's actually from Facebook. And also Alex Lloyd Hunter talked about this last week at Project Everyone. And he also looked at actually how you can use social media advertising, because some of this can be done at really low cost and actually deliver some brilliant results. And you can actually experiment at very low cost to find out what works. So again, do access those resources. So moving on to the next slide. I've been through a lot of fundraising content there pretty quickly. I'm gonna do some on service delivery, probably even quicker. You know, this webinar is intended to skim the surface of a whole lot of topics and give you links to where you can get into more content in more detail afterwards. And so service delivery, 10 design principles. This is published by CAST. It's a brilliant resource. Do use it. I've summarized the points here. Want to call out a couple. So the top one here is start with user needs and try to keep them involved. So the needs of your beneficiaries are fundamental. Always keep those top of mind. And then use what's out there, you know, so don't be inventing complex tools. Because there's lots of tech already out there that you can pick up and use very quickly, very simply. So make these small steps, use existing technology, which is often low cost, in some cases free as well, and then learn and evolve that over time. But also don't forget about privacy and security, and I'll say a little bit more about this later on. Now I wanted to share a few examples rather than talk theoretically of what charities are actually doing. So this is feedback that came into us from our campaign for our request for stories. So the first is the Caldwell Limecoat charity. So they focus on raising awareness around the risks of Lyme's disease in particular. That's for people who work outside a lot or are visiting outside a lot. They have 1 full-time member of staff, so they are not a large organisation at all. And they had a talk scheduled with the Surrey Wildlife Trust. They reorganised this as a Zoom webinar. They recorded it and they put it on YouTube so it could be shared with others. They've now actually booked 2 more of these sessions with other wildfowl trusts as well. And the interesting quote from Rosie said, "It's made me wonder why we didn't always do this. It's much easier to reach organisations and it's much more environmentally friendly than having to travel across the UK." Another example came from Arch. So thank you, Elaine, for sending this in. So Arch is assisted reading for children. They have around 300 volunteers who read to children in schools. They typically have 3 children they read to. Again, small charity, about 150,000 of income. And what they've said to their volunteers is, can they record, video themselves reading their stories, and then they'll put those online. so that the children can actually access them there. So again, very simple way of maintaining a service. Harbour Housing, so they're a supported housing charity based in Cornwall. They need to be in regular contact with their clients. They normally do this by their staff actually going on site. Obviously, they can't do that anymore. So what they've actually done is they've given all of their staff iPads, and they've put laptops in secure rooms at each of their properties. They've then used TeamViewer to remotely manage those laptops and set up video chat and file sharing sessions with their beneficiaries, so they can actually continue that dialogue, and the clients can actually go into that room and start up those sessions without actually having to touch anything, because it's all externally initiated. So they're actually dealing with a hygiene issue in a really clever way there as well. And the last one I wanted to touch on was Merlin, Multiple Sclerosis Centre, again based in Cornwall actually. So they support therapy, support people with therapy who've got long-term neurological conditions. A lot of their service users have isolation and loneliness. So the first thing they did was they actually set up a keep in touch project. So they call their most vulnerable people daily and they call their others weekly. They're also putting together a program of virtual exercises and putting those online to help their service users. And they've got a Facebook page where people can communicate with each other. And they're looking at virtual fundraising. So what I wanted to do there was share some really practical examples of what charities are doing today that's having a positive benefit for their beneficiaries. Let's move to the next slide. So really just summarizing, you know, quickly some of the technologies. So video, you can use YouTube, Vimeo, put it on your website, information on your website. One-to-one support, we've touched before on Zooms and Teams, they're great for that. Other platforms apply as well, tech services as well. Peer support, you can do that. Facebook groups, Telegram is a good one for secure support. And again, video conferencing, and you can do webinars and broadcasts. Some resources at the bottom of the screen here you might want to look at to help you further here as well. And let's look at how you can support the services as well. So you're going to need to have the basics in place, something like Microsoft Office or Google for Nonprofits, so you can actually communicate amongst yourselves. You're going to need to make it really easy to contact you. So you might do that through social media, WhatsApp for Business, or through your existing email. But I think the really important point is whatever channel you use, make sure it's resourced and make sure that you're actually responding to those inquiries that come in quickly. If you're booking lots of calendar sessions, you might want to actually use an app. So something like Calendly is really good for doing this. People can actually self-service on that. And don't forget safeguarding and privacy. And here actually many of the existing rules apply. So the types of things you would have thought about when you were delivering face-to-face, you need to apply the same principles here. So how do you actually keep your beneficiaries' data private? You shouldn't be sharing their email addresses and phone numbers. So one of the important points here is if you're actually using WhatsApp, that actually shares a lot of that data. So be aware of that. Confidentiality, you need to consider that at both ends. So the person, if it's a counselling session, delivering that needs to be somewhere where they're not overheard, and you need to plan it so the beneficiary can be somewhere confidential as well. Think about your existing safeguarding and how you tweak that from online as well. And there's a great resource to get more detail. This is actually a resource from the SCVI, so do head over and look at that. And finally, also on this, you might also want to think more about how you're working with people who are tech averse to support them as well and get them more into the use of your service. So that kind of wraps up what I was going to cover. Now handing over to Lisa, who's going to quickly run through some of the tech offers before we open up for Q&A.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan, and hello everybody. Nice to speak to you all today from hopefully the comfort of your on home. And yes, like Aidan and Jonathan said, with remote working now, the default mode for so many of us, I think it's really important to ensure that you have the right digital tools to continue working, supporting your beneficiaries and service users, and continue generating fundraising income, all in the most secure and safest possible way throughout this period and beyond. Many technology companies are providing the solutions free of charge or at a discounted rate all year long. Some even have a dedicated COVID-19 offer available. So that's why over the past few weeks, we found and listed some free and discounted solutions that we think could definitely help you and your colleagues navigate this challenging period. But also looking beyond, these digital tools can definitely help you achieve more, whether or not you usually work remotely. They're low cost, they're time savvy, they're user friendly. So elements that should help you focus your resources where they matters most. So here's a very short review, because obviously we can't go through all all the available solutions. So you can also check our product and topic section on our website for more details. So carry on the next slide. As with all charity colleagues we've been speaking to, the first thing you probably want to ensure is that you stay on track with your mission and all the projects you've undertaken, and most importantly, that you stay in touch with your team. You may need tools that can help you decide what's important to do now that everyone is working from home. You know, how to delegate tasks to your team, track the work is done, keep everyone reminded of deadlines. So like as Jonathan and Aidan said, once the system is set up, many platforms can, you know, help you initially do a great job. We've got a lot of resources on our website, including tools for managing a remote workforce, and we'll go in that in a second. So in next slide, we're going to see some basic. So Office 365 from Microsoft, fully integrated, and as you're probably aware, with Microsoft Teams, which is easy for communication, and the whole Office pack for the document creation. You can also store and share files with Microsoft SharePoint. It's interesting to highlight that they have one offer, the Office 365 E1 option, which is now available free of charge for 6 months for non-profit volunteers. So if you want to communicate easily with your existing and maybe new volunteer base, you can check it out. There's also the Google G Suite. So if you require a lot of live collaboration on all documents, and if you require like a simpler version of Words and Excel, Google Docs and Sheet could be very, very healthy. The basic version is available for free, and check our Google Nonprofit Program page on our website. So you also need to make sure that each of you access the files they need to carry out their mission. So we've already talked about SharePoint from Microsoft. There's also Dropbox, which is a platform that allows file sharing between all remote teams. On top of their current charity offering, they have released a 3-month free subscription for all charities that are currently fighting coronavirus. A more integrated solution is Box, which is a single place where you can securely manage, share and control all of your files and folders. It's very handy because it's connecting to all your app. You can check the Charity Digital Exchange as some of their user licenses are donated through us. Now, on the next slide, we're going to explore a little bit more some web-based solutions to help you collaborate remotely and manage your projects with all your team, so that you can make sure that things get done. Not most of the software that we're going to cover all of a free basic subscription and discount rates for charities if you want to upgrade. Asana is one of the most famous. It enables teams to see different workflows, deadlines, responsibilities. There's a lot of feature, so it's very well suited to large organizations or teams with a lot of different projects that are running concurrently. Asana is free for teams smaller than 15 people, and it's available at a 50% discount for all charities. Currently, their support team are also providing free support. So yeah, it's worth checking them out. A simpler alternative is Trello, which is great to create boards with to-do lists, organize tasks, track progress, set deadline. It is very, very user-friendly. We could also mention Monday, which is a great project management tool, and it's especially good for charities that are handling a lot of data that you can aggregate in a simple single report. If you're more advanced and want a more comprehensive solution, you can also check Basecamp. If you're just looking for, let's say, some, team collaboration tools to brainstorm ideas, to keep the conversation flowing within your organization, even if you're all remote working, we are personally a great fan of Miro, which is a whiteboarding platform where everyone can move around post-it notes, digital post-it notes. We used it to debrief our Be More Digital conference, and we loved it. So they have a free basic plan and offer 50% discount on the pro account to all charities. Of course, you may need to make sure that everyone is available for the meeting. What a lot of people are using is the Doodle, which is a free calendar app, very simple tool to schedule group meetings and make sure that everybody is available at the right time. Now on the next slide is just to give you a kind of flavor of what Asana looks on the right and Trello looks on the right, and Asana is on the left, Trello is on the right, with how you can see your to-do list and task, and see what has been done. Next slide is more after easier ways to keep communication flowing. If you really want to make sure that all of your staff, teams, and maybe service users are still in touch with you to help you carry out your mission. As Jonathan and Aidan mentioned, there's obviously Microsoft Teams and Zoom, of which you can get the basic version free of charge. But there's also other options out there. There's Slack for internal communication that creates channels where different teams can work together and send messages. We heard some great examples from charities like Parkinson's UK that have loved it. Slack is currently free for organizations with less than 250 staff, and they're offering a 3-month free subscription for nonprofits that are involved in the fight against COVID-19. There's also Workplace by Facebook, which allows you to create group and use Facebook in a more work-minded environment. It's free and free for most eligible charities. Finally, for organizations with smaller resources, there's WhatsApp, which remains free and enables you to set up group. Do look out for possible GDPR and safeguarding issues, like Jonathan said, but otherwise it is a great tool and very handy and very user-friendly. Obviously, following up from Jonathan's slide on service delivery, if your organization is maybe worried about providing the right support to your beneficiaries, there can be some online chat providers that can be helpful, and that can be set up very quickly. We've found Twilio and Live Chats that have a dedicated free offer for charities at the moment. Live Chat, among other things, are offering 10 free seats, so it's worth having a look. Obviously, with all this remote working, you need to ensure that your organization can operate safely and securely, especially when dealing with beneficiaries. Like Aidan said, really what we would say here is to make sure that you're up to date with the latest software and the antivirus versions. So eligible charities can have access to vast cloud care through the Charity Digital Exchange. It's also worth knowing that some UK-based IT companies are currently offering their IT support free of charge, like Smart Desk and Curatrix. These are included in our tech offer article on our website. And of course, know that your teams are connected and securely working. One key thing is to remain in constant touch with your supporter base. You need to remain honest about your fundraising message and don't be afraid to explain its importance to your audience. It might be worth reassessing how you position your messages. Do a bit of brainstorming and checking your messages are still appropriate. So obviously, to create impactful messages, you can use freelancer platforms like Fiverr or Worksum, which are very inexpensive ways to find the best talent. And if you want to do that in-house, we've got quite a few options out there on the next slide. Like Canva, which is free for up to 10 users. You can create fantastic graphic design, whatever your level. This is what we're using here, and we love it. A great alternative is Design Board with a bigger media library and more storage space if needed. Easily on the top right-hand side, if you're looking to create simple infographic. There's Sparkle for the videos, which are offering 50% discount. And for the most advanced of all of us, there's Adobe Creative Cloud with Photoshop. So now that you have a beautiful message and content that is ready to support your fundraising efforts, might be a bit daunting to select the right fundraising format and platforms. So we are currently updating the latest information, like Jonathan said, so it's going to be available for you very soon. Worth mentioning a couple of fundraising platforms that are waiving their fees during the COVID-19 crisis, like Crowdfunder or Fundraising or Give As You Live. And obviously, using social media will only make it even more impactful. So there's obviously Facebook and Instagram, which have free options for charity. And to help you create, plan, and schedule fantastic social media content, we can think of Lightful, which was developed specifically for social good. They're behind the hashtag Reclaim Social. They have great time-saving features like a built-in awareness day, a great media library. There's a Hootsuite, which is a good alternative and better suited for larger charities. They're currently offering free access to their Pro plan until July the 1st. So yes, those are the main tools that we thought would would probably give you a little bit of help. We hope that this little overview will help you achieve even more now and beyond the crisis, and support your service users, and most importantly, still engage with your supporter base. So most of this information can be found on our website, so please do check it out, and we're here to help you. So now, thank you very much for listening, and I'm handing back to Chris.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and apologies for the slide mix-up there. There was some dodgy bloke changing the slides in the background. I'm not quite sure who he was, but you will all get the resources afterwards, so you can go back and have a look at Fiverr. In Workforce, I believe it is Fiverr, something we use quite regularly, and it's actually a really good tool, especially when you can't get out and create all the amazing content that you're used to. Thank you also, Aidan and Jonathan. Great insight, and I think some really helpful tips and tricks to get everybody set up and on the way, and realize that in this time that is a bit, it's murky water, is that the hope isn't all lost, and there's be brave, be bold, and let's carry on through this. I'm going to mention this now before we dive into the questions. We do usually wrap up these things up at 2:00, but since we're 3 minutes to now, we're going to crack on with your questions because there's quite a few coming in. So I know some of you might have to jump off, which is no worries at all. We'll be recording all the questions, and you can catch up with them in the recording that we send out within the next few days. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. If my esteemed panel wouldn't mind chucking the cameras on, that would be great. First question coming in from an anonymous attendee, and this is one we kind of preempted actually, so thanks for asking it straight off the bat. What about the security issues that keep cropping up around Zoom? I think, Aidan, what do you think about that? How can you sort of best direct people who have those sort of reservations?
Yeah, I mean, if there was one question I think we were sort of expecting, I think we could safely say it was this one. And it's definitely been in the news a lot lately. I think it's something we've all kind of been concerned and looked into. But what I would say is that as the market leader and the most visible platform out there, Zoom is going to attract a lot of criticism that could probably be leveled across the board at a number of platforms. No platform is perfect or without its flaws. But with that being said, I think that a number of the complaints that people were registering or issues people were experiencing with Zoom, they can be overcome if you alter the default settings. I think a lot of them have been changed with new patches and updates that have come through, and others can be alleviated, by just going in, taking that little bit of extra time, checking that your settings are set up in a way that that really suits you. And another thing, I saw the question in the chat. I know you mentioned specifically WebEx as well. WebEx is something I have personally used, and I think that it has really strong functionality for collaborating while you're on a call. So, there's a number of great platforms out there, and they all have their own individual strengths.
Yeah, I just kind of resonate with what Ian said. I think it's, all of the panels, all of the products will have their own positives and negatives. And I think that's great sort of piece of advice that we only hear about Zoom because it's the one in the spotlight, essentially. So about doing your due diligence, essentially. Next question up is from another anonymous attendee. Some shy folks out there today. I'm particularly interested in virtual events. However, I worry that as a small charity team, we're not best placed to manage this ourselves. If you were looking to have a company managers force initially, who would we recommend? And what virtual events are most successful? Jonathan, I believe you can add some flavour to this one.
Yeah, I think this kind of follows on, obviously, from the slides where I was talking about virtual events. I think whether you use a company to help you or not depends on what the virtual event is. So if it is a sporting challenge, I'd kind of try and encourage you to do that yourself, because if you've already recruited the people to take part in it, then you kind of know who they are. So it's just a matter of communicating to them that you'd like them to go out and fulfill their run on such and such a day, that you need them to record it, you need them to send you the evidence, and then you'll send them a medal, be it a real medal or be it a virtual medal, and the fundraising platform behind that. Where you might want to do it a little bit differently is if you haven't if it's entirely from scratch. There is a platform called Primo, which is actually used for running these types of events, and they have they pivoted it to support virtual events now as well. So that kind of covers the sporting events. If it's a quiz, there are companies that will run quizzes for you, but it's not super difficult, to be honest. You get yourself your Zoom channel set up. You get everybody to dial in. You link in by clicking on the link. You probably mute them most of the time so that the question master can be heard. But you can actually run it. And in my links, there's actually one of the images was actually a link to tips on how you run a great online quiz. If it's an online auction, you probably do want to use a company to do it for you. I don't have any personal experience of those, but again, the image that was in the presentation linked through to a company that actually does these as well. So there are organisations that do it, but you'll save a lot of money if you can do it for yourself. So it kind of depends on the scale, the complexity, as to whether you do it yourself or not.
Great, thanks for. And any flavour to what virtual events are most successful?
Well, I think the virtual sporting events are pretty successful. Quizzes definitely very, very popular. People love quizzes anyway, and they're definitely going down very well at the moment as well. I haven't seen lots of evidence of online auctions happening, which seems to be, they seem to happen a lot more in the US than the UK actually. So I'm surprised that more of them haven't happened, but I don't see any reason why they shouldn't. And they, I think we all know from experience that if you have interesting enough lots, that auctions can generate a lot of money.
Great stuff. So next question from Lynn. In terms of gift aid, does anyone know if HMRC have decided if we can claim on Facebook donations as they currently come in? That's quite an interesting question. Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I'm not sure why why Facebook's mentioned here, because my understanding of Facebook, of gift aid is as long as you get the donor to provide their agreement and that they qualify, i.e. they're a UK tax giver and they can confirm all of the relevant statements, then you're able to claim it. So I'm assuming, I've not personally used Facebook donations myself, I'm assuming that the issue is that it doesn't collect the data in the first instance to enable to do that. But if you have their contact details, i.e. if they haven't been anonymous on that, there's no reason why you can't go back round the loop, ask for that data. Doesn't have to be done by communicating with them directly through Facebook. Obviously Facebook connects to Facebook Messenger as well. So there are different ways of getting to those people to give you their consent and the information you need in order for you to claim it.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. And next up from Camilla. Are you aware of any funds trusts that can be tapped in to help engage the isolated audience who don't have access to the hardware, devices, Wi-Fi, etc., to be able to engage with digitally? Camilla works in the social action sector, like homelessness, neighbourhood poverty, etc.
I'll take this one as well then. Feel like I'm monopolising all the questions. Yeah, so I think, so the challenge here is there are a lot of emergency funds that have recently been launched. Those are probably the best ones to tap into for something like this. As I said, there are over 250 of these listed on the Charity Excellence website, and I haven't personally been through them all to kind of identify what they're all best for. So all I can really recommend is that you head over, log on to that site. It is totally free of charge, and access that resource and quickly scan it through. And if you do find something, then do share it. And I think this is one of the actual really interesting points at the moment. This space is moving so fast at the moment. Things are changing on a day-by-day basis. We're sharing as much as we can, but it'd be really fantastic if we all help each other as well. We have our Charity Digital Facebook group, so that's a closed group. Basically, you normally get an invite to that if you're a charity and you participate in one of these events, amongst other things. So if anybody does, find the answer from that, it'd be really, really great if they can share that on the group so that we can all actually help each other.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's about banding together and coming together, and that resource is a great one. So yeah, drop a question in the group, and I'm sure someone will be able to help out. Next question. Do you have any services, communication tools which are more accessible and easier to use for people with learning disabilities? This is a question from Fernanda Mello, and that came over from the chat. Lisa, Aidan, do you want to can you take that?
Yeah, so I can try and answer. Obviously, it'd be also good to know what maybe your service users are already using, usually to communicate, whether they even own mobile phones or if they resort more to direct contact. So I would say very easy communication tools. If maybe they have WhatsApp or if they have an actual laptop, maybe try Zoom. I would say something that they are familiar with, obviously, and that they might already be using in a sort of day-to-day basis. That's
as well, Fernand, we've got a webinar actually coming up in 2 weeks' time with Microsoft. They obviously have Teams, which is a massive communication tool that allows for collaboration and communication as well. And next week's webinar is solely on how you use their accessibility tools within those. So I would recommend coming along to that in 2 weeks' time and having a look for yourself to see how Microsoft uses it. I'm sure there's plenty others out there, but we do know internally that Microsoft is one of the front runners when it comes to accessibility, and we work closely with them on that. So join us next week. 2 weeks' time, sorry.
And I think just quickly building on what Lisa said, I think it's always really good practice if you can kind of meet your service users on the systems and the means of communicating that they're already using. I think what you can do then is put the onus and the accessibility onto that. It's less like finding the right methods, like what methods are they already using to communicate, and then how can we make those more accessible. I think it's just another way, another bit of perspective on framing that approach.
Thanks, Aidan. Next question from Erin. Do we have any examples of youth work charities that have gone digital in response to COVID-19? Now, I haven't delved through all the responses we've had to the stories yet, so I'm not sure if there's any youth charities in there. Do any spring to mind for anybody else?
The Mix, I would say, have been doing some good work. That's like specifically a charity aimed at young people, which obviously I think the thing is when you're looking at a charity aimed at a younger audience, they already have a fairly heavy digital presence. So maybe it's easier for them to pivot, but they're, I think they've done quite a lot in response to this, changing their service delivery, just pivoting even more into that digital space. And I think that we are going to have some content going live on that in the near future. So do keep an eye out for that as well.
Magic,
Yeah.
thanks. Oh, sorry, John.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that as well. So I was talking to a fairly small charity a couple of weeks ago, and they were focusing on counselling services, and they had done it all face-to-face, and they took that digital very quickly. They're doing it over Zoom now. But they could equally well have used Skype or one of the other tools. So that's one example. Another example from a much larger organisation, kind of coming at it from a different perspective. So the non-counselling perspective was actually the Scouts. So the Scouts obviously totally focused on doing lots of activities face to face in the good weather indoors and the bad weather in halls. They can't do any of that at the moment. So they actually have published a whole load of resources designed for their cubs, beavers, scouts, depending on their age groups, different type of material, kind of indoor activities they can do as well. So that was an example of a fairly quick pivot. I'm not aware of anybody going to the next step of kind of running a session that way, but it can so totally be done. It's kind of like here are the instructions. Let's have a Zoom session running. You can have a number of people, number of children, could all be kind of online and doing it at the same time. For me, it's kind of this is a great time for actually experimenting, because everybody understands that services have had to be changed and evolved really quickly. So there's a bit of acceptance that there'll be glitches in the process, and there'll be learnings along the way. So as long as you're not kind of straying into what I call kind of safeguarding dangerous areas, if it's just a bit glitchy, not as slick as it should be, my recommendation is just go for it. You'll find out what works. You'll be able to tune it. You'll be able to make it better over time. And we're actually going to return to this topic of how you make it better over time, because we recognise that for a lot of people it's early days at the moment, and there will be ways to kind of learn and evolve over time from the experience we're all getting now.
Yeah, now is definitely a time to be brave and to be bold, I think, and try those things we wouldn't necessarily have tried before. Good words, Jonathan. Thanks very much. A colleague of mine has just shared something with me. If we go back to the gifted question, an article that gives some sort of helpful tips and tricks of how to get gifted from Facebook, but it kind of suggests that it's not very easy at all. So leave that one with us, and we'll pull something together, and that gives us something to work and look into and push some content out in the next few weeks. Thank you for that. Next question from Thomas. Thomas is a youth worker from Shrewsbury House in Liverpool. What are the best apps to deliver youth work online or devise interactive activities in?
I was just trying to think. Obviously, we've mentioned a whole bundle already. So what I was just trying to think of whether there was anything to add to that, and that's why I was being silent, because I didn't have anything initially to add.
I'm guessing there's a lot to think about, isn't there? You know, when you're working with young people, security, and things like that, accessibility. You know, stuff like WhatsApp is an ease of, you know, now that it's all encrypted, is an easy way to communicate it and pull things together quite quickly, and, you know, manage, you know, if it's a sort of youth volunteer base, or even to get something up. It itself can't host anything like a quiz or something like that. But there's plenty of, you know, alternative chat rooms and stuff like that out there that do have, you know, that don't have as many questions over it as Zoom does. But as we already mentioned with Zoom, it's pretty much because it's the biggest player in the game at the minute. I'm trying to think. Stuff like Adobe Connect, I used that last night for an online course I'm taking. Is a little bit, you know, there's a little bit of nuances in how you get it to work, but, you know, for someone who's, you know, a teenager, younger, highly tuned into to the digital lifestyle, it shouldn't be any problem. And that provided a really cool classroom environment as well, if that's the sort of thing you're looking for. Yeah, I think off the top of my head, I think those are the top that kind of spring to mind that we haven't necessarily already mentioned.
Yeah.
Champion. Thanks very much, Thomas. Next question from Daniela. Do you have advice concerning the data privacy? I've jumped away from this. Do you have any advice concerning the data privacy concerns that seem to be in the news regarding Zoom, but also other platforms? Kind of answered that already. So we might skip past unless anybody wants to add to that, Aidan.
Yeah, I would just sort of revisit kind of what I said about Zoom and dig that out a little bit. I think a lot can be done by arranging your settings. And I know Zoom, let's use that as the example, has a lot of default settings where data will be shared for analytic purposes that you can quite easily opt out of. But it is a question of going away, finding out what your default settings are and changing them. And that's something I've spoken to charity professionals about in the last few weeks. So I think, you know, it depends on the platform as well, but always go away, check what your settings are, see what can be done before, I think, you know, writing off a platform.
Thanks, Aidan. Next question from Sarah, sorry. We don't have staff available for individual matching of volunteer to task. So I'm looking for a really easy platform to communicate with a group of volunteers. I want to throw a request for help into the pool so any available volunteer can pick it up and respond quickly and easily. Any suggestions?
WhatsApp, that sounds like a good
yeah,
WhatsApp.
that's what I was about to say. Yeah, WhatsApp is the easiest, very quick. As always, people need to make sure that they can share their phone number and picture with the whole group, so there can be some data protection here. But WhatsApp is the easiest way to get quick answers and get things done.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sorry,
I'm going to build on that a little bit more, because there is a disadvantage to WhatsApp, and that's it's not always the easiest to follow a thread on. So if you want to actually mark off that the activity has been allocated now, it's quite hard to see. Its strength is that it's obviously immediate, cheap and easy to get going. A Facebook group, so a closed group where you put all your volunteers into that group and you throw it out to that group. People can then respond by replying to that message, and you can put in that thread that task is then allocated, so that people kind of then realise that's kind of the quick and dirty. I am aware of a platform that I'm actually going to be talking to early next week, who are actually looking to deploy this. It currently works commercially to help match freelancers up to jobs, and they're offering it to bring it into charities to match. It'd be a what I call an open rather than a closed pool of volunteers. So after I talk to them, if it looks good, we will share details of them as well, because I think in the furloughed world where there are lots of volunteers, getting them to do a lot of your work to help is a great idea. So I'll publish that as soon as I've kind of had my meeting and done a bit of due diligence on them.
Thanks, Jonathan. Next question from Julian. How can we provide protected content? For example, videos people pay to access.
That's a very interesting question. I think if you are looking into having like gated content, so content that would only be accessible, whether that was video or otherwise, to certain levels of subscribers, Patreon is a platform that would enable you to do that. It would enable you to do it quite easily. I think it's one of those things that you can do with a bespoke platform, which is sort of what we do, just not paid. But then that takes a lot of setup and quite a lot of work. Whereas if you're using something like Patreon that's already set up, it enables you to do that, but not spend too much time on getting everything online. So if you wanted to do it for video content particularly, I think Patreon could be a good fit for that.
Is Patreon its own platform, Aidan, just to dive into a little bit more? Does it work through YouTube?
I believe that it is its own platform and is often used by YouTubers, but I have never actually set up Patreon.
Yeah, no, I think that's the case as well. I hear a lot of, it's big in the gaming world. A lot of gamers use Patreon to get paid for the video that they output. But yeah, to Aidan's point, I think, it's putting up the proverbial paywall on your site wherever you host your videos, and you can do that in a number of ways. And I think, Patreon is one that I'm familiar with and heard of as well. But there's a number of others out there. Again, it all kind of depends what you're using the videos for as well. There's a lot of ways you can tap into fundraising videos and all that sort of stuff, Twitch and little things like that. So there's other things to consider as well. But thank you for that, Julian. Next from, we already had that one. We're on to our last question all of a sudden. From Guy, any advice for approaches to digital delivery to people with a visual impairment? Are the solutions discussed here accessible?
So I think this goes back to your next one, Chris, where you're actually going to be talking to that's particularly Microsoft focused, isn't it, around what they do around accessibility, which is a really big focus area for them overall. I think some of the other tools are accessible. I'm just trying to think. So if it's visual, it's turning into sound, obviously, isn't it?
Like read aloud, and we're going to talk a lot about this next week with Microsoft. That covers a range of different types. But yeah, read aloud's one of them, and there's a few others as well that we know about. So again, Guy, I'd recommend joining next week.
Oh, we've got another question.
It's just snuck in right at the end there. Coming back. I tried to run a webinar from home, but it failed to broadcast because the presenter and I didn't have adequate broadband. What's your secret? A whole lot of luck. No, we obviously joke, but we do. Jonathan, do you want to take it? Actually?
Yeah. I mean, we're all actually on different connections here as well, so we don't have any one secret. My approach, because I am miles away from my Wi-Fi point, is I'm actually lucky enough to have some wiring in my house, which means I run the wire directly into the router, which gives stunningly fast speeds actually compared to any Wi-Fi connection, and I do have a good connection to start with, although it can also depend what other people are doing in your house at the same time. So if you have I have 3 children and they're all streaming content, then that can cause a bit of contention, although my wired connection is always going to be better because they'll be fighting for the Wi-Fi bandwidth first of all. So that's my tip. My colleagues will have to tell you what they did individually.
I think my secret is in a small place. You're never too far away from the router. But one thing, like I mentioned earlier, and I would come back to, is a mesh Wi-Fi system can be used to boost that if you're struggling with Wi-Fi in your own home. If you have a weaker signal, I think that's a good avenue to explore.
Yeah, and I know some of us actually physically plug into the walls as well, which sometimes help. But a big, one of the big things that goes into the running of our webinar, Sarah, is testing and practice. We always do a few practice runs beforehand and test the platform, test bandwidth. Now that can't necessarily give you, give you the certainty that on the day everything will run fine, but it gives you the comfort to then go ahead and be reasonably happy with what's going to happen. And this is the second one we've ran now completely fully remote. We're all in separate locations, as Jonathan said, and touch wood, it's kind of nothing seemed to have gone wrong yet. He says, I've probably just jinxed us for the next time, but I think it's more the perfect planning scenario, and kind of try and set plenty of time up in advance to really run through it, instead of just kind of going off the bat. You can't obviously account for what's going to happen there and then. If someone's Wi-Fi drops out, it drops out. But one of the techniques we've kind of picked up as we've gone along this webinar journey, we've been doing them for a year and a half now, is like, whatever happens, own it. Don't hide away from it. Don't shy away from it. Things go wrong, and we kind of put that caveat at the start of these and go, look, if it happens, it happens, but we'll find a way to come back, and we'll find a way to get the content out there, because at the end of the day, it is the content what's important, and it's about making sure we get that out one way or another.
Yeah, I think just to add as well, if you're running video and voice channel, that requires more bandwidth. So if you've got you've got two people involved and you've got a set of slides, drive the slides from the place with the highest bandwidth. And if you have low bandwidth, just go to voice. And let the slides be in the other place, and that way your voice might then might be enough bandwidth for your voice to broadcast over the slides which are being sent from the second location. That'd be my tip to work through that challenge.
Yeah, I actually chucked in a different one today that I'd almost forgot about. I actually used our slides in PDF mode instead of in PowerPoint as well. Again, just to, save on those megabytes, essentially, because you always find the upload speed is a lot worse than your download. So we did that today, and it seemed to have worked quite well for us with this, with our videos on in this instance. So yeah, but again, it comes down to the two words we've kind of pushed forward all day, and that's all afternoon, and that's be brave, be bold, just keep trying. I hope that didn't put you off. I hope you're going to give it another shot and get your awesome content out there to the people that need it. What a lovely question to finish on. I enjoyed that one. So thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you to all of you that stuck with us. Still, 50 plus people with us as I look now. Thank you, Aidan, Lisa, Jonathan. Great content. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure our audience did as well. As I mentioned earlier, we have a COVID-19 campaign live now. We would love to hear from you. Ask us anything, how we can help you, how we can get you through, get you on that Be More Digital track, regardless of where you are. And we'd love to hear your stories as well. So please send them to us, and we'd love to change them to send them to our audience, share them with our audience, and have them learn from how other people are doing it. Sorry, I forgot to change slides there. If you want to add to that, we will be sending links out after this, so you can submit your questions and submit your stories. You can always do that through our website as well. So what else have we got going at the minute? We are in the middle of our COVID-19 podcast series. If you haven't tuned into that yet, I would recommend so. We started last week with how to get set up with remote working. This week we challenge getting started with digital fundraising. Next week actually will be my session from the Project Everyone last week with Fundraising Everyone, with Fundraising Everywhere, sorry. So that'll be about fighting crisis with content. I'll give you all the sort of secrets, tips and tricks of how you can get out and break through the noise in a time where we're all completely saturated. The podcast series is going to be running for a few more weeks yet. So make sure you head over to the website, head over to our podcast page and subscribe and look out for them coming down the line. As we mentioned in the Q&A, our next webinar on April 23rd is with Microsoft. We're kind of taking a break from all things, COVID-19 at the minute to focus on stuff that is just equally as important. And that'll be on the tools and tech that can make your charity digitally accessible. You can sign up for that right now on our website. Getting great traction so far, so make sure you join in. And as always, if you ever want to keep updated with any of our stuff, you can sign up and register for our site completely free of charge. And we push out content and emails and email updates, regularly 3-4 times a week to stay in the know. Lastly, and I'll be told off if I don't mention this, is feedback. Please, if you wouldn't mind, share your feedback with us on how you found the webinars. We are always looking to iterate and improve, and I'll get you the content that you need to hear about more. So please take a few minutes and fill that in and let us know how we're getting on. thank you all. Thanks our panelists. Thanks guests. Thank you all, participants. Stay safe, stay sane, and we'll speak to you very, very soon. Cheers.